morning. Let's get started. Nice to see you all. I, Carrie Pruitt, called the meeting of the Student Advisory Committee to order at 9 a.m., January 17th, 2025. We have a roll call.
Roger Button,
Present.
Tracy Moore,
Present.
Carrie Pruitt,
Present.
Lacey Keeley, Charles Aglabat, Rayleigh Killingsworth,
Present.
Danielle Valencourt,
Present.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public comment?
Rochelle Murillo,
Good morning, everyone. Rochelle Murillo for the record. I just wanted to say during public comment, because this is not an agenda item, we do have a new member that has joined us today, Danielle Vaillancourt. So we will put her on the agenda in the future so she can formally introduce herself. She's a parent representative, so I just want to take the time to acknowledge her and thank her for being on our committee. She was approved by our Board of Trustees on Tuesday as an official committee member. So I just wanted to say that.
Welcome. Okay, item 2.01, approval of the minutes of the September 13th, 2024 meeting of the Student Attendance Advisory Committee. Is there any discussion on the minutes?
Tracy Moore for record. I make a motion to approve the Student Attendance Advisory Committee meetings from September 13th, 2024 to be approved as posted.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion passes. Okay, agenda item 2.02, presentation of the REL West Ed Partnership on reducing chronic absenteeism, an overview of all projects to include the check-in, check-out pilot, and building attendance interventions.
Did you guys vote on the minutes? I didn't hear you vote.
Oh,
You have to vote.
I'm sorry. All in favor of approving the minutes, thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Assume that's no against because we're all, okay, thank you.
You have to call if there's any nays.
Are there any nays? Any opposed?
Okay,
Motion passes. Okay. Now, agenda item 2.02, presentation on the REL West Ed Partnership on reducing chronic absenteeism, an overview of projects to include the check-in, check-out pilot, and building attendance interventions.
Okay, Rochelle Murillo for the record. Good morning again, everyone. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of this new pilot that we started actually on Monday. We have been working with REL West Ed, which is a national organization that helps us better understand important information around education and topics around education. They're specifically looking at chronic absenteeism. So what's on the screen is related to another agenda item, so sorry if that's distracting. I did hand out a handout though around intervention. So I want to talk to you as it relates to this pilot. So they're doing multiple things with us. They started out last year with helping us to understand what kinds of interventions are schools utilizing around chronic absenteeism. They have developed some tools for us to help schools understand what is an intervention. So essentially, there are things that we do in the school district that are sometimes practices or strategies and interventions. Interventions are different because these are things that we implement that are very frequently evidence-based, and then we measure those outcomes to see if they're effective or not. And that's the difference between maybe a strategy where you're trying something, but you're maybe not measuring it. It could be a strategy can be a part of an intervention, but an intervention is actually evidence-based and is something that you measure based on a time period to see, is this effective? Are we seeing a change in behavior? For example, chronic absenteeism. So they developed this tool here that helps us better understand what is an intervention, what is a strategy, what does that look like, so that schools can kind of think about the way that they want to approach things in terms of interventions with behaviors and chronic absenteeism. So I gave you an example of that. One of the interventions that they list on here for attendance is check-in, check-out. This is something that our school district has done for many years, but it looks different across schools and across the staff that are implementing it. Check-in, check-out is meant to be sort of a mentor program where essentially, just as it says, you check in with a student when they come in, you see how they're doing, and then you check out at the end of the day. How did your day go? Did everything go okay? We put some more structure into a check-in, check-out. We have developed and done some research-based models, and we are doing a pilot that started at 5 different middle schools on Monday, where we have staff that are doing an evidence-based check-in, check-out at these middle schools with students who are 6th grade between the percentages of 10 to 20% chronically absent. So we'll be doing that for 6 weeks with a 2-week fade out. We have a couple of control schools as well, so that we can better understand, is this an intervention that actually works? Do we see a difference in attendance? Will chronic absenteeism decrease when we implement it with fidelity at these schools? We picked 6th grade because that's where, if you recall in the past, 6th grade is where we see large, significant increases in chronic absenteeism. So we wanted to see, okay, will this work with 6th graders who are chronically absent? So we started it on Monday. We did lots of training with WestEd, with the mentors, and with the coordinators that are coordinating this. Each school has around 20 to 30 students that fit into the criteria that we are looking at. I'll be able to report to you probably at the beginning of next year, because we'll need some time to sort of analyze. We're going to do 2 cohorts. We started the first cohort on Monday, and then we'll start the second cohort late March. Any questions about check-in, check-out?
Carrie Pruitt for the record. I do have a question.
Yeah.
This strategy is, in my experience, has been very, very useful, very helpful. And we've talked in the past about students having a trusted adult
Right.
in school and how significant that is. For this check-in, check-out, is the person they're checking in and checking out with, is it the same person every time, or
It
a
is.
selected person, not just attendance office? Or?
No, it's not an attendance
Yeah.
officer. It is a school staff person, though. So a person that they could check in with every day. So they do have to do a daily check-in every day. They have to document what that daily check-in is. There's a family component, so reaching out to the family. There was some student voice component in there in terms of who they matched with who. So it could have been a teacher. It could have been the attendance clerk up front. It could have been the principal. It could be a coach. Whoever the student is identifying as someone that they feel like they have a relationship with or could potentially have a relationship with.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Roger Botton for the
Yeah.
record. I think that's a great idea. It helps start
Yeah.
building a connection.
Early
I
on,
think,
hopefully.
early on, yeah.
Yeah.
And to see, you sometimes have to see if that connection is working or
Right.
not, and it can change. But I think that's a great way. That I think there's a lot of middle school kids who, express the opinion that they don't have any connections
Right.
there. No one really cares. So I think that's important. So
Yeah, the hope
great
is if we
move.
see positive outcomes with this, we'll continue to expand this particular model across our schools and the rest of our middle schools, and then we'll expand it across the school district. It'll take time for us to do that, but this particular model with Fidelity, because it's research-based, we would need to do some training with schools and staff as we expand it, if we find that it is effective. If we find that it's not effective, then this is something that we've been doing for a while, and maybe we need to focus our efforts somewhere else, right? In a different intervention or strategy. So it'll be interesting to see what WestEd comes up with the actual outcomes.
Roger Bond for the record. We implement this a lot in elementary,
Yeah.
and I do think the catch there is doing that with fidelity.
Right.
It's not just saying, "Oh, how you doing in the morning," and then just seeing in the afternoon. It's also teaching them to be aware of their own actions and what's their, you know, if they're coming or not, or what's going
Right.
on. So I think kind of
Yeah,
following
I think
throughout
that's
the
a
day.
good point. You know, some of this model is talking not just, you know, it's developing that relationship. It's helping kids to develop self-advocacy skills. It's, you know, doing a lot of work in terms of how do we support students so that they feel like they're a part of the community, school community. They feel like they have a voice.
Roger Bond for the record again. Have you looked into Behavior Advantage program we just got? That will help automate a check-in, check-out format.
Yeah, this particular model is not designed to look particularly at behaviors. It's attendance focused only. So there is a check-in, check-out that is based on sort of intervening with behaviors that you're referring to. This particular one, the goal is attendance. Sometimes behavior is related to attendance. So there's a component to that, but the primary goal around this one is attendance, getting to school and engaging in school. But we can look into that further. We're going to see how this one goes first. Yeah.
Carrie Pruitt for the record, just to tag on to that we find with our foster kiddos, we often request this check-in, check-out because having a trusted adult in their lives, you know, could be a challenge for them for a while or ongoing. So that person ends up being potentially a person they go to during the day if they're having trouble. So at least they have a person, you know, a trusted adult at school. So I think it's great.
Yeah. Any other questions about check-in, check-out?
Danielle Valancourt on the record. I do have a question based off of the information that the child is disclosing to this person. Does this person have to disclose everything to the parents, or maybe it might be related to the parents and the child is scared of disclosing certain information?
Yeah, so those are tricky situations. We do have to talk to, so we have to get parent permission for us to be able to meet with a student ahead of time. But this person does need to disclose to parents if a child does disclose to them any issues around safety or those kinds of things. That does occur sometimes. Now, if it's related to the parent, so let's say, for example, a child reports that the parent is physically hurting them. We have to do a report to Human Services Agency, and then they would follow up with an investigation to either unsubstantiate or substantiate that claim. So that's how they sort of work around those kinds of issues. But in terms of when we meet with family or children, typically we do have to kind of talk with parents about what their children are disclosing to us, unless it's related to a safety or neglect issue. Okay, the final part of this check-in, check-out, West Ed partnership is the Student Attendance Review Board. So based on Nevada revised statute, there's a couple of things that we are compelled to do with NRS around attendance. And one of those things is called SARB, the Student Attendance Review Board. We are the Student Attendance Advisory Committee, also addressed in NRS, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the agenda. But the SARB meets once a week. We get referrals from schools around students who are typically severely chronically absent. We do that Wednesdays at an elementary level, and we do on Thursdays at a high school and middle school level. Some of you sit on those boards, and in those boards we talk with the family, we talk with the student if it's appropriate. That's not always appropriate at an elementary level, but very frequently the middle and high school level, the students are there. There's representatives from counseling, from Human Services Agency. I'm on that board. Doug Taylor, our attendance coordinator, is on that board. Human Services Agencies there, Juvenile Services is there. So we have a lot of folks there to offer their expertise around what are the barriers that this student or family is experiencing around attendance, and we address those during those times. We want to better understand why the students that we are getting referred to us are being referred to us. What criteria are schools looking at when they decide this student needs to go to a SARB versus another student that we don't see through SARB? We see approximately about 100 students a year, but we have thousands of students that are chronically absent. So we want to better understand, okay, we're barely touching the issue through SARB, right? But why are the students that we see coming to us? What is happening? We do have criteria. We want a student to be on a formal attendance monitor with an attendance officer before they come to us. We want them to be chronically absent, and we want the school to have at least attempted 3 different interventions to address attendance before we see them through SARB. But we want to better understand why students are coming to us, so that we can also think about the outcomes for the students and who is the student that's most appropriate, who would see the most benefit from SARB. So we're looking at that first, and then we'll look at some other areas around SARB to better understand the effectiveness of SARB as well. So,
Roger Botton. Just a question, do we have, or I'm sure we do, but I haven't seen that, a list of schools who prefers to SARB and who doesn't?
we do.
Because I'd like to see that,
Sure.
with elementary, so I could, talk to those elementaries. Usually the counselor that would be referring, talk to them, see
Right.
what that information is, why they choose to refer or not.
Right. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Yes.
I was just wanting to clarify, I didn't realize the counselor is the one that makes the referral to SARB.
Not always. It's it's at elementary. It's typically
Okay.
the counselor. That's not who it has to be. It's just kind of the typical thing. At a middle and high school, it's typically an assistant principal that does those referrals. And the people that are there are the family, either an assistant principal, a counselor if they can make it. Sometimes the principal attends those as well. And then anyone else that's appropriate should be there.
Yeah, sorry, Carrie, for the record.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have attended some ESARBs, and it can be really helpful. It's not necessarily punitive, which some people going into the meetings are fearful of, being in trouble. But it's a real collaborative, brainstorming of what can we do to help you? What can the
Right.
school district do to help you get to school, to help the family if they're having challenges, getting their kids up in the morning or whatever it is. So.
Yeah.
And I also
Yeah.
know that kids go to SARB if they're referred, and some schools do refer more than others, so I think that data could be interesting to take a look at. And of course,
Right.
then how the school district promotes the schools that aren't engaging as much to
Right.
then, make more referrals.
Yeah, and when a family goes through a hearing, they are always assigned a case manager for 45 days after to help them follow through with the recommendations of the board. Okay, that's it.
Okay, agenda item 2.03, presentation on addressing truancy and attendance through the perspective of Washoe County District Attorney's Office.
So Charles Aglabat, who is the district attorney that is on our board, could not be here today. He got pulled into court. So we will postpone this agenda item. I do want you to know that he is going to be addressing a part of NRS 392.210. And I just wanted to refer you to it real quick so that you're familiar with it when he talks about it. But there's a portion under this NRS called penalty for failure of parent, guardian, or custodian of child to prevent subsequent truancy limitation for providers of foster care. So this talks a little bit about, let's see, let me look at the last part. A person who is licensed pursuant to NRS 494030 to conduct foster home is liable pursuant to subsequent, sorry, I don't have my reading glasses. I have to look back. Subsequent one for a child in his or her foster care only if the person has received notice of truancy of the child as provided in NRS 392130 and negligently fails to prevent the subsequent truancy of the child within the school year. There's also penalty for abating truancy, unlawful employment of a child absent for school. So I just want to put these in here. There's also penalty for failure of parent, guardian, custodian of child to prevent subsequent truancy. It also talks here about these folks can be guilty of a misdemeanor. So I asked the district attorney to help us better understand this portion of the law and the position of the district attorney's office around this, so that we can better understand what does this mean. I am in no way promoting being punitive to families. There are multiple reasons why families have a difficult time getting their children to school, but I want to better understand this law also. So he's going to be doing a presentation around this in the future around this. So wanted to let you guys know about that.
Tracy Moore for the record, too, as you discuss the law, too, I don't want to get too deviated off this agenda,
Right.
but since you brought it up, now is probably the time, if you guys feel that some of these NRSs are not appropriate, the school district does have representation
Right.
that we've contracted to.
Right.
If we need to bring up some form of a bill draft review, revisions, suggestions, because there are some other things that school police were looking at that are not related to this, but I feel that if you think this is the right time for further clarification, maybe let me know. I can certainly reach out to Mr. Shaver and his company, but I mean, we need to take advantage of time before the session starts to get our request in.
Yeah, I think it's important for this committee to let me know if you have opinion on this law as well, or the different portions of the law. I am also in contact with him, and so is our chief over our office, Dr. Lamarca. So I think any sort of feedback we can have around these laws is important as we move forward. So thank you, Chief Moore. That's a good point. So we'll get more information from our District Attorney Aglabot in future meetings.
Okay, agenda item 2.04, discussion on providing potential recommendations to the Board of Trustees from the Student Attendance Advisory Committee members to address strategies to reduce truancy and chronic absenteeism for Washoe County students.
Okay, this is me again. Let me pull up the right portion. Okay, in particular, I wanted to bring this up. We've had public comment in the past that's asking for this committee to think about what sort of actions we would collectively take, or you all would collectively take as a voting committee member. I just wanted to remind you what the duties around this board are. This is a Nevada revised statute mandate for our county to have. It does detail who needs to be on this committee. We have to have a probation officer, we have to have law enforcement, we have to have community partners and a parent, and human services agency representative. So thank you all. You are filling important voices of different parts of the community that we need to have. But it is also asking us to, when appropriate, look at our data around chronic absenteeism. So frequently I present that data to you all. Good thing is right now our data is slightly lower. So we're hovering somewhere between 9 to 21% at any given day. It's different because every day, because it's a percentage, but we're slightly lower. So we're hoping for a good trend. But it also compels this committee to think about any recommendations that they might want to vote on and provide to our superintendent to address reducing chronic absenteeism, which includes programs or other things that you think might be appropriate. So we sort of have had a standing agenda where item where some of you have presented sort of your agency's perspective or your role in the district's perspective on chronic absenteeism. But I wanted to put this one forward. This is for possible action around if there are any recommendations or actions where you would like to move forward to provide recommendations to our superintendent around programming or any other area that you think could help us reduce chronic absenteeism. So I'm going to turn it over to you all to discuss this item.
Roger Botten, for the record. I sit in a lot of SARBs and ESARBs, and one of the issues I see come up, or recommendations I see frequently, is the need for outside counseling or even internal counseling. I know with finances recently. We're going in next year, we're losing social workers and something, and mental health support people. I think we really need, if we're addressing that, I think, we see that that is an effect of what's going on. Families in crisis, struggling with whatever situation there. You can argue what role that the school has in supporting that, but it does affect us and kids' mental health, and that comes along with if they're feeling stress, or whether it be bullying or harassment at school or family issues. I think that's a big one. I think we need, and what I've seen is that we put a lot of those supports mainly in secondary, but those problems, I think, start in elementary. And I think we have to be proactive in that, in supporting families in mental health, even early on. I think a lot of times we put things later when, I don't know if that's too little too late at that time, but if we can do some preventive and start these problems, because those family issues and students not feeling whatever comfortable or safer except at school start early on. So I think we need to start looking at putting in supports early on, and not just in middle school and high school. That's where we see the problems come full blown, but they start early, and I think it's always wise to put our efforts in prevention early on rather than wait till it's a crisis and then we're just trying to put Band-Aids on the issue.
Carrie Pruitt for the record. I agree, and I feel like this committee has addressed that at some level, pushing in interventions earlier, especially with kids entering middle school now in 6th grade, which is a big challenge for middle school's a challenge anyhow, but going in younger is a huge adjustment. Then add in some additional family challenges, trauma, other mental health issues, and it really exacerbates the problem. So I feel that although we need more, we have a lot of good programming in place. The re-engagement officers, although they are for the older kids, that case management is very effective, but we don't have enough, and we don't have enough truancy officers. So, and we don't have enough mental health providers. It's just been all over the news recently too. Our state is lacking providers in all areas of public health. So the resources are not there to implement a lot of the strategies and programming that I think we would really like to. I'm just stating the obvious, but I'm not sure what we can do about that.
Maybe hosting, Danielle Valancourt on the record, maybe hosting financial literacy classes, not just for, like elementary schoolers and middle schoolers, but doing something on a quarterly basis that's sent out in a newsletter that's available to parents and anybody that wants to take advantage of things like that, because there are quite a few financial literacy things that go on in town that people would be happy to volunteer their time to help people address those things. Possibly. When it comes down to support or with absenteeism with kids, is there any way to do wellness checks on children that have chronic absenteeism that aren't getting parents to call back or anything like that?
So we do go do home visits frequently. We typically, on average, are doing somewhere between 3,000 and 3,500 home visits a semester.
Yeah.
And we do that when students are not coming to school, right? So the attendance officers or the re-engagement specialists will go out and visit if they are able. If they're very, very concerned about safety, sometimes we do partner with law enforcement. School police are located, and working within the school. So we don't always call on them just because they're busy with school-related kinds of things going on. Sometimes we call law enforcement to go do wellness checks. Not very often, because we typically will be able to get in contact with the family, but we do those frequently. We go out and do home visits.
Oh, Roger Botten for the record, in response to that.
Yeah.
If our counselors see any instance that they're suspecting an abusive or neglectful situation, they do request wellness checks from law enforcement.
Yes, sometimes there is a miscommunication in between the two, though, because law enforcement is not allowed to contact the school and let them know about anything that's happened possibly at the home that has been abusive or reported or anything like that. So it's hard for the counselor to know if anything's actively happening to a child, if there's that miscommunication involved, right? But everybody's in contact. It's hard to really communicate with the child about their needs when they're scared to talk about anything.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what's going to happen. And then maybe something has happened and it hasn't turned out to be the best thing because they get to live with the abusive grandparent or
Yeah.
XYZ. It's all very circumstantial. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to respond again with that. Law enforcement does have access to a handle with care report.
Yeah.
That if they, and there's not a lot of information that comes with that, but if they're see a situation that is traumatic or they need some other assistance, they can make a report to the school. It's kind of a confidential report.
Yeah.
But let the school knows it's something that we need to support this kid.
Gotcha. And then just another comment for middle schoolers, just because I know a lot of extracurricular stuff has been taken away year by year from kids, and I feel like a lot of people just don't know what they're meant to do anymore. The world's turning into a dark place, so even like easier jobs that people used to have are no longer even available or even really taken seriously. So maybe having some sort of like volunteer-based reach out with the community of chefs that have free time, that they go to TMCC, right, and they help people cook and they help the younger students there that can't go to regular high school. They choose to go there instead because maybe it's a better community or maybe it's just a better school in general, that they can offer their services to possibly help these kids in middle school to feel like they have a place to go to. If they had an outreach of, hey, this is the time and day, 2 months ahead of time or whatever, and it's going to be located at this school. If you're interested in learning how to do cooking or arts or metalworking even, or being a mechanic, things like that. It's just kind of having like a job fair based thing, but it's not a job fair. It's just teaching you what each trade is and how to get implemented in it at a younger age, I guess, on top of going to school. Just because it's really hard to know what you like to do if you're not really given the opportunity to even try it or look at it. And a lot of parents just don't try anymore. They're tired, which is not a good excuse. It's just how it is, unfortunately. And maybe that'll help people come to school if they're a little bit more excited about what's coming up next. Gives them a little incentive to go
Yeah,
to
I do
school.
know. So I think you have a really good point. It's building that community for students and having them be able to engage in pro-social kinds of activities. This year, our district has expanded clubs and sports to 6th graders, which is really great. And they have a new position dedicated to clubs and sports. So I know that they're working on that. And so that's really great. And I think you have a good point. Making school fun again. And so I've heard some principals talk about bringing things in for kids to do that are just fun to do, that just makes school fun to be at. And then they also have done it in conjunction with, if we know maybe Thanksgiving holiday, kids are off for a long time, and so maybe they don't want to come back on Monday, so they'll schedule something really fun that Monday that kids want to come to school for. So they're trying different techniques like that, but I think anything that the community can come together to sort of just build that community for students to be able to do fun activities and engage them in activities, I think is always a good idea.
Yeah, just giving them a reminder why they go to school. Not
Right.
only so better themselves, but to really prepare themselves for what's ahead.
Right.
And what's out of school.
Carrie Pruitt for the record. I feel that we do have a partnership with, we as a school district, I'm not part of the school district, but as a team, that has some CTE programming partner, that the school district is partnering with TMCC on some dual credit courses and exposing kids, but I believe that is in high school. So to your point, it's starting kids earlier and letting them know that these trades are out there, to build that sense of community and to let them know kind of what their options are besides the daunting thought perhaps of going to college. But livable wage positions and things that might just be fun jobs during high school. As they go through their middle school years, just kind of having a better knowledge of what's out there. And I'm not sure what we're doing at the middle school level with that.
Yeah, I remember
But that's,
even when I went to middle school here, they had woodworking,
Yeah.
auto shop, we had metal class to where we can use Sawzalls in 7th grade. You know what I mean? And they trusted us with that. And I know there's a lot of people that have probably worked on things younger than that even. So it just kind of, we need to give trust back into the kids and let them understand that we are preparing them for their future instead of just sitting behind a desk and a computer being told what to do. It's like you actively can make a choice for yourself and choose what you want to do, but it's just not available as an option, I feel like, in middle school. And then they really start thinking about it in high school, but then they get stressed out, possibly not given the right resources because they're pulled into many different directions. But I do think maybe starting a little bit younger so that they had this thought for themselves and kind of get driven on their own, in a sense. Because then they can try it and say, okay, I'm done with that. Just something to think about.
So we have several different things that the committee members have talked about, themes. As a reminder, this is an action item. You don't have to take action on this. We can also have this as a standing agenda item. It can be something as simple as you'd like to vote for us to continue to think about this or look at it. You could direct me as a staff person to look at this more. Just as a reminder, there are many reasons why students are missing school. The 3 buckets are around relationships, with peers, with teachers, and academic insecurity. Some of what you all are talking about in terms of engagement. When they miss a lot of school, they get farther and farther behind. Some of the things that Roger Botten spoke about were our mental health. Transportation is also an issue. There are housing insecurity, high rates of rent costs in our district, so we have high rates of transiency. So there's multiple reasons why students are missing school. So as a committee, if you're thinking about what recommendations or actions that you would either like to provide to our superintendent or direct me to look into further, you all can discuss that and determine. Also, one other thing I wanted to point out that Roger was talking about in terms of staff and the funding around staff to address some of these areas is also the pipeline. The folks are, there are social work positions that are not filled out there because there's not the folks to apply for those positions too. So that's just one example. I know Chief Mort has been working on hiring and that's been difficult. So, I know that that's probably an issue across all of our agencies is just pipeline, trying to find the folks to help us to support students.
may I ask Carrie, for the record, sorry. Do we have social workers in the elementary schools or does it start as in the middle school?
We do just have a couple of them.
Okay.
And whether how long that stays or, how solid that is questionable. But at the moment, I think we just have 2 at certain schools.
I asked a question on that, Tracy Moore for the record. On that note that you had mentioned and that I was going to ask on that one, how many allocated full-time employee positions do you guys have for that? I guess, what's the vacancy? You're allocated these positions, how many do you have open?
Are you asking about attendance officers or social
I think
workers or?
the elementary school intervention at the social worker level.
We don't have any open ones at the moment. I mean, we have some others and we're losing. I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if I can address that.
I do know what I understand is that we're unclear about the funding picture of what positions look like because we're still early in the budget season, so we don't know what that will look like in the future, but these might impact positions that directly address some of these areas that you all are discussing. And we also have soft money for some of our attendance officers. So half of them are general funded, half of them are grant funded. Same with our re-engagement specialists. So some are in general funds, some are in soft funds. So
Roger Botton. Yeah, it's a difficult kind of question just to give you one answer to that. We have 2 issues. One is what Michelle mentioned, that we do have when we do have some open positions, it's tough to get people, especially like school social workers, who are licensed to work within the schools, but also just needing additional funding. When we get it, sometimes it is also hard to get that filled, and that's just I mean, you even see that there's a lack of mental health support even out in the community sometimes. Again, people, we need more people, but there's two things. One, money to get people when we have them, and then needing a pipeline to get people who work in that field.
Carrie Pruitt for the record. I wonder if we could get creative, and there might be some of this going on already, but to utilize potential like clinical interns, folks working on their clinical licenses that need those clinical hours working under, being proctored by someone in the district, students that are, I know we have social work students, but I think there may potentially be a pool of paraprofessionals that we could draw on in the community to help the people who really want to be in these positions and haven't, and realize they're not going to be paid for a while, but that's where their hearts lie.
Roger Button, yeah, we were looking into options for that.
Yeah, I can only really speak to social work because I'm a social worker. But so there was some question, and I'd have to research further if the Nevada Board of Social Workers considered schools as a clinical setting for folks. We have bachelor level social workers that do internships, and we have master's level social workers that do but a clinical social worker who's doing their clinical hours, I'd have to look into further whether they were able to, do you know, Roger, if they were able to get schools
That's something we were
approved?
trying to look at
Yeah.
and see how we can address it. That's a complicated
Yeah,
thing. You're
it
working
is.
with the board and with the school and what they want within, but that's going to drag us off in a different
Yeah, so for the purposes of this committee, think about things that you might have, that you might want to recommend for the superintendent, things that we might have more control over, or programming or other things that you feel like that you would really as a committee want to stand behind and recommend to the superintendent that we move forward. So one thing might be, once we get the results of check-in, check-out, and we see that it's very effective, that this committee could vote to recommend that we expand check-in, check-out, and provide training to all middle schools or middle and high schools or those kinds of things. So that's just an example. That's not, you don't have to do that, and we can also table this also, so we don't have to take action today. We can keep this as a standing agenda item. If you feel like you need more information about something, you could vote today to have me bring back more information to help you feel better prepared and educated around certain topics, to make recommendations to the superintendent. So there's a lot of ways this committee could potentially
Roger Botton again. And I think that this topic is one of the key reasons for this board to exist. That the school board itself doesn't have time and doesn't have the intimate knowledge of what's going on with attendance. So I think that's our job. I think I would like to make a motion to continue this discussion and come up with some, I think we should be coming up with suggestions to the board on a fairly frequent basis. I mean, that's where it exists as advisory, say this is really what we need to be doing. This is the problem we're seeing out there. And these are suggestions, I think, ways to improve it. It does affect the attendance. I don't think we have to argue that point. That affects the students greatly in their success at school and in their lives. So we should be addressing that. And we have a huge problem with it. I don't think that's up for argument either. So I think there are some things that we should suggest and continue that. I don't know if we have enough to make a suggestion now, but I think I'd make a motion that we continue that and then come up with some actionable ideas for the board.
So if I understand this,
Oh, no. He can certainly take the motion, but I'll let that go through and I'll just have comment. But I'll
So-
second his motion to keep this as an active agenda item.
Okay, do you want to clarify it really quick what the motion is so that we're,
Yes.
yeah.
I'll make a motion. The motion was to continue this item,
Okay.
to review that, to move forward with recommendations to the board as further discussion. So continue that to make further discussion.
Okay.
Continue this item. Does that make
And I'll-
sense? Or I just keep talking?
I will continue with the second.
Okay, so motion made by Roger Botten and seconded by Tracy Moore to continue this topic as a standing agenda item.
Yeah, so you need
And-
to ask the committee
right.
if there's any other suggestions or follow-up, and then we have to
Okay.
ask for a public comment.
Right, okay. So is there any further discussion?
All right, so on this topic item, in my opinion, I don't think we need to make a motion, but we can keep it as a continued rolling agenda item. But on this topic, being relatively new to this board, the thing that, and if you already did it, let me know. Have we surveyed these chronic absentee juveniles and asked just the reason why? Why don't you come to school? If we had some data, we do a climate survey for employees. We do that for students. We get information from parents, but are we getting information from the students of why?
So we have in the past, and we could do it again, Chief, more recently. So it's been probably over a year. So we have done focus groups around why are students missing. The theme around it is they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, they don't feel like anyone notices when they're not coming to school. It's has always been around relationships and connectedness with adults and other peers.
All right, perfect. I just wanted to, we're also
Yeah.
data-driven, that I feel that if we had, I don't come to school because of X, if we could just pick the number one, 90% of the kids state it's X. If we could determine what that factor is, I know this is a priority of the board, it's a priority of the superintendent. I just got
Right.
my budget request, and there's a checkbox on there that is specifically for chronic absenteeism. So I think this is the appropriate time. If this group wants to make some suggestions, we certainly can. If there's things that you all feel that law enforcement from school police should be doing and it requires funding, certainly bring that to my attention, I'll make it. I think now is the appropriate time for this group to make these suggestions to the superintendent. Everything costs money, but I can tell you this is a high priority by our school board and the superintendent. They're seeking information from this group of what are your suggestions to move forward. I can certainly speak from a law enforcement perspective, but there are other members in here that have far more expertise and suggestions. But I do bring back this, we probably as a group need to identify, we can't fix it all, but we can certainly chisel away at it. If we know this is the number one reason why I don't want to come to school, I think we just start there.
Yeah. Yeah, and Doug Taylor with Communications has done some student voice projects recently around attendance. And so there's videos that have been developed. So I can show you an example of those, but we can delve deeper into student voice and talking with them too. We can definitely do that. And then we can look at our climate data. There are some questions related to attendance on the student climate survey.
If I want, Danielle Valancourt for the record, if I would like to look up some of these data points myself, how would I go about that? Like, which is the best source for me to use if I were to look at?
So in terms of the data that we publish, it's all located on our district website. So and I can look in and show you exactly how to get there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then I just had one other question, just
Yes.
from what clients have spoken to me about when they're fundraising for political officials. There's a lot of talk about using RTC as a source of transportation in the mornings.
Yeah.
Like the smaller buses, the disability buses that you can schedule from your phone, and having that be neighborhood controlled basically in the morning for a specific time frame all the way up until 9 o'clock.
Right.
So that if you were to enroll in a specific program or however you do it, the parent can go onto the app and, basically have it scheduled out to when pickup can be and drop off. And granted, it only has space for a limited amount of children, and they're not always very full. So it just really depends on what area they're in and how much they're being used. But that has been a question from some people is, could we use RTC disability buses or the smaller buses
Right.
during specific timing in the day? Not all the time, just like we're really having an issue filling in school bus drivers and then how close the school is, variances and things like that, so.
Yeah, so I do know that our director over transportation and the chief, Adam Searcy, are looking and working with RTC now. I don't know the specifics, but they are looking at ways to become more creative with those kinds of things. I don't know where it's at, but I do know that there's some efforts to work with RTC around those. So maybe we'll have some updates for our next meeting that I can provide for you.
So since we have a motion, a second, I need to take a vote.
You have to vote, yeah.
I remembered. Okay, everyone in favor of the motion?
There is
passes?
no public comment, by the way.
Oh, thank you. All in favor of passing the motion, say aye.
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 Are there any nays? Okay, motion passes. And then, Carrie Pruitt, for the record, I wanted to, Danielle, you reminded me, there's a community action group. I don't know the name of it, but we both served on that, Rochelle, and we talked about perhaps having an agenda item or potentially adding it to this one, or it being separate to report out what that group is doing.
Yeah, we can discuss that. That's not the part of this agenda item,
Right.
but it is strengthening our communities, so we can, excuse me, we can talk about putting that on an agenda.
Okay, great. So I think it's part of knowing what can be done is having a little better understanding on everything that's being done. And so that topic I know is, I think, part of that community action group.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if we don't have any more discussion on this agenda item. No? Okay. Then we can, I wanted to check again to see if there's any public comment or,
For 3.0, no, there is no public comment.
okay. Okay, our next agenda item is announcement of our next meeting on March 14th, 2025. And 3.03, adjourn our meeting. This meeting is adjourned at 9:52. I know.
I'll probably mess it up.